What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best Path of Exile 2 builds in 2025. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on. Then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it for both leveling and endgame. And then finally we will go over the passive tree, stats, your skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. If you are looking for any of these builds on the website, then click my link in this video's description or the pinned comment. This setup is known as the Bombarding Minions build that mainly uses a Skeletal Arsonist for both AoV and single target damage, while then we can even further increase our DPS by casting Detonate the Dead, which explodes dead enemy corpses and let us speed farm every single content in the game. This build is the best of both worlds because it combines very quick clearing speed with aggressive playstyle while also having minions that protect you, and at the endgame you will be able to reach from 15 to 30,000 energy shield, which basically will turn us into an unstoppable puppet master. And on top of this, unlike other witch setups, our build will also focus on the Grim Feast buff that is used to provide an extremely strong defensive layer by doubling our energy shield in the maps, so that you can easily complete the highest tier maps in the game. So let me show you the build, and for the main class we are going with the Witch, and our ascendancy is the Infernalist. Then for the first skill we have the Pain Offering with the support gem called the Fawn of Rage, Persistence, Ablation, and Fawn of Blood. Then second we get the Skeletal Storm Mage with the Conduction, Stormfire, Overcharge, and the Lightning Penetration. Then next we get the Skeletal Cleric with the Ingenuity, Last Gasp, and the Minion Mastery. Then next we have the Skeletal Warrior with the Maim, Culling Strike, Blind, and the Physical Mastery. Next up we have the Skeletal Arsonist with a Scatter Shot, Heft, Fire Infusion, Feeding Frenzy, and the Concentrated Effect. Next we got the Grim Feast with the Clarity. Next we also have the Detonate the Dead with the Spell Echo, Brutality, Magnified Effect, and the Arcane Tempo. Next up we have the Summon Infernal Hound with the Mage Shield, Fire Exposure, Strip Away, Splinter, and Demolisher. Then next we got Flammability with the Heightened Curse, Spell Cascade, Inspiration, and the Focus Curse. Then for one of the last ones we have the Flame Wall with the Fortress, Arcane Surge, and Mobility. And finally for the last one we are using the Raging Spirits with the Elemental Focus, Immolate, Martial Tempo, and the Fire Mastery. Most of the setup is structured around using the skeletons and activating Detonate the Dead to delete huge amount of enemies in seconds. So we use gems and skills that will support and increase their size and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at the spell and minion damage node, then go like this until we get to all of these, so the Power of the Dead, Raw Destruction, Open Mind, Pure Energy, Living Death, and the Dampening Shield. Then from here let's get this whole circle and then keep on going until we get to this node called the Grip of the Evil. Then now let's circle back and this time go to this top part, while also grabbing the Necrotic Touch and the Dead Can Dance. Then from this point we want to get the whole right side, and then when you got that, then from that point you can just unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. All of these nodes that we got are very useful, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority, as they're the most important ones to acquire early on in the game, to make our build functional, and then in the late game to make it even more powerful. Also, as far as attributes go, you just simply want to fulfill your attribute requirements for gear and skill gems, and then after that spend the rest of your leftover attributes into more intelligence. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Loyal Hellhound, or extra minion and reduce damage taken by 20%. Then second, get the Altered Flesh, which will help us to deal with physical damage if you have Chaos Resistance. Or if you're stacking maximum fire resistance, then you will take less cold and lightning damage. Then third, we want to go with the Berat's Will, which will give us a lot more spirit, but we will sacrifice 25% life reservation. But for sure this is 100% worth it. And then finally, we want to get the Berat's Hand. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. So when we start we want to first of all get to the left side and get all of these nodes, and then keep going down until you get to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. and then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this, we have even more passives. Which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter, so again it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Then next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Rattling Scepter, which gives us the Skeletal Warrior skill. And for bonus stats we want increased spirits, max mana, allies deal more damage, and get increased critical damage bonus. And then finally we gain more levels of all of our minion skills. On top of this, we also have an offhand called the Oak Sworn with the armor and energy shield. And for the extras from this we get a new skill called the Raised Shield. Then also increased block chance, increased armor and energy shield, more to spirits and chaos resistance. But the shield is not required and you can easily go with any other option just with similar stats. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Feather Tiara with the energy shield, and for more we want max energy, max life, more levels of all of our minion skills, and fire resistance. Then for the chest we have the Expert Altar Robe with the energy shield, and for bonus stats we got faster start of the energy shield recharge, then also increased max energy shield, more to spirit and cold resistance. Then for the belt we have the Fine Belt with our flask gaining faster charges for every second. And then for more we got max life, max mana, more to charm slots, and fire resistance. Then for the gloves we got the Expert Intrinsic Gloves with the energy shield. And for more we got max life, max energy shield, also increased max energy shield, and fire and cold resistance. Then for boots we're using the Expert Feathered Sandals with the energy shield. And for more we want increased movement speed, max energy shield, and chaos resistance. Then for our first and second ring we got the same thing, which is the Winter's Gamble. But again, this item is not required for this build to function. So if you can't or just don't want to get it, then you can go with any other ring as well. And then for bonus stats we want increased rarity, max life, more to spirit, fire, cold, and lightning resistance. And then finally for the amulet we got the Lunar Amulet with the max energy shield. And for more we want more to spirit, max life, plus levels of all of our minion skills, and fire and cold resistance. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap. This is a starter setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. So we want to start our highest damage rotation by first of all casting the Flame Wall, to summon Raging Spirits and then cast the Flame ability, to debuff your enemies. Then we cast the Pain Offering to buff your minions for a massive damage increase. And then finally in maps we want to use Detonate the Dead as soon as an enemy has died to explode their corpses for improved even faster clearing speed. On top of this, if your minions get stuck then you can just set up your second weapon set to have a 0 summoned minions in the skill tab. By doing this, all of your minions will despawn when you spawn your second weapon set, so then you can quickly swap back to your main weapon set, which will cause all of your previous minions to respawn right next to you. So just keep this in mind. This setup is the Spirit Minion build, which summons bunch of Raging Spirits by casting the Flame Wall for the offense. And then also for defense, we get to command a minion army. So unlike most other builds where you only command or cast spells, well, in this one we get to do both, and thus increase our DPS even higher. By using specific gear and building our skill tree around nodes like the Power of the Dead, Fear the Dead, Silent Guard, and many more, it will enable us to upgrade our minions and projectile area and damage. So if you're ready to explode anyone and everyone that stands in our way, while also getting a skeleton army that follows and protects you, then let's get right into it. So let me show you the build, and for the main class we have chosen to go with the Witch, and the ascendancy is the Infernalist. At first glance it looks like we're using way too many skills, but most of them are passive and will work in the background, so we will only use few of them on our skill bar. Then for the first skill we have the Summon Infernal Hound with support gems like the Elemental Army, Mage Shield, Fire Exposure, and the Strip Away. Then second we got the Unearth with Minion Instability and the Infernal Legion. Then next we got the Flammability with the Heightened Curse and the Spell Cascade. Then next we have the Skeletal Arsonist with Feeding Frenzy, Scatter Shot, and the Martial Tempo. Next we are also using the Flame Wall with the Fortress and the Arcane Tempo. Next we have the Skeletal Warrior with the Brutality, Splinter, and the Maim. Then we got the Raging Spirits with the Fire Infusion, Elemental Focus, and Emulate. Next we have Pain Offering with Magnified Effect and Persistence. Then also we're using the Skeletal Storm Mage with Conduction, Stormfire and Overcharge. Next we have Skeletal Cleric with the Ingenuine and Last Gasp. And finally for our last one we got the Grim Feast with no support gems whatsoever. Most of this build is structured around using minions and the raging spirits, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their area and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually activate in the background. Next, let's quickly take a look at our leveling setup, which we need to use up until about level 25, because the first few levels can be a bit rough until you get the Raging Spirit skill. So first off we have the Unearthed with Minion Instability and Brutality. Next we have the Skeletal Sniper with the Martial Tempo and the Scatter Shot. Then next we also got Contagion with Concentrated Effect and Elemental Focus. And then finally we're using the Flame Wall with Fortress and the Arcane Tempo. This is your basic setup up until we increase our damage. Next up we have our passive tree. For most new players, this can seem extremely daunting, so let me quickly explain. In very simple terms, every character is granted one passive skill point every time they level up, and are sometimes even granted more for completing certain quests. We have 3 node types, so small nodes, notable nodes and keystones. All of them act as checkpoints that you want to reach and make a path to build around a specific playstyle. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at the spell and minion damage node, and make our way like this while on our way grabbing the Raw Destruction and the Power of the Dead. Then now let's go to the right and get these 2 red nodes and then these 2 more blue ones. Then after that we want to circle back a little and make our way all the way to here to get the pure energy, which will increase our defense, which we desperately need in the early stages. Then now let's go again back to the top, but this time take the left side, and then from here we want to take all of these half circles, so we could get the Essence Infusion, then the Growing Swarm, and also the Dispendable Ward. And now from here, just make your way all the way to the top of the right side. And the order in which you do it doesn't really matter, as long as you follow this path. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for our Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning, you want to unlock this Loyal Hellhound for an extra minion and reduce damage taken by 20%. Then second, pick the Altered Flesh. Then next, get the Baidat's Will for more maximum spirit. And last, pick up these 2 small life nodes, since you want as much life as possible for the Baidat's Will. And then as far as the attributes go, I recommend to take enough strength and dexterity to meet the gear and support gem requirements, and then use the rest on the intelligence. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Rattling Scepter, which base grants us +2 levels to the minions. And then for the bonus stats, we also want to get increased percentage to the minions, allies deal more physical damage and just more damage increase in general. And then for the offhand, we got the Blazing Crest Shield with armor and energy shield. And for the bonuses, we want max life and more resistances like fire and lightning. Then for the helmet, we have the Iron Crown with armor and energy shield. For bonuses, we want max life, plus levels to minion skills and more to cold resistance. Then for the chest, we have the Pilgrim Vestments with armor and energy shield. For the extras, we want max life, more to spirit and fire resistance. Then for the belt, we have the Rawhide Belt with increased life recovery to flasks. And for bonuses, we want max life, fire and cold resistance. Then for gloves, we got the Thorn Gloves with max life, fire and cold resistance. Then for boots, we're using the Straw Sandals with energy shield. And for bonuses, we want increased movement speed, max life and cold resistance. Then for the first ring, we got the Sapphire Ring with cold resistance. And for more, we want max life and attributes like the Strength, Dexterity and Intelligence. While on the second one, we got the Ruby Ring with fire resistance. And for more, we want max life, dexterity and intelligence. And then finally for the amulet, we got the Jade Amulet with dexterity, max life, more to spirit and plus levels to minion skills. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. So the general gameplay of this build is to summon the Raging Spirits by casting the Flame Wall. Then use the Minion command skill provided by the Skeletal Arsonist to deal area-wide damage. You can also cast the Flammability to either reduce enemy damage done or increase your minions' damage. Then as far as utility goes, you want to cast the Unearthed on the enemy corpses to spawn an army of the minions that explode when they reach low levels through the Minion Instability and the Infernal Legion. You also want to buff your army of the minions with the Pain Offering to increase their damage. But as I said, this build is very versatile, so there's no one best way or order that you should use your spells in. what I usually like to do is just to have always my minions up, and then just spam Flame Wall, Flammability and the Unearth. And then for harder boss fights, we can even implement the Pain Offering and other support skills. So, this endgame build will utilize the Skeletal Frost Mages by buffing them insanely high, so then in return we can do huge amount of damage. They also can freeze enemies and bosses, which will make very hard content a walk in the park. This build's greatest strength is its primary defense, so we will have a massive amount of energy shield, and by using the Grim Feast we will double it, so in the endgame we will be able to reach up to 13,000 energy shield. On top of this, our setup's playstyle will allow you to clear quite aggressively, while still being able to pull back and let your enemies protect you from the enemies whenever needed. If you are looking for very OP but passive gameplay, where most of the work is done by your minions, then this is the build for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class, I have chosen to go with the Witch and our ascendancy is the Infernalist. Then for the first skill, we have the Skeletal Frost Mages with the support gems such as the Arcane Tempo, Scatter Shot, Feeding Frenzy, Vault Charts and the Cold Mastery. Then second, we get the Skeletal Storm Mage with Conduction, Stormfire, Lightning Penetration and the Overcharge. Then next we got Skeletal Cleric with Ingenuity, Last Gasp and the Minion Mastery. Next we have Pain Offering with Persistence, Ablution, Inspiration and Fan of Rage. Next up we have the Hypothermia with a Heightened Curse, Spell Cascade and Focus Curse. Next we got Frost Bomb with a Spell Cascade, Fan of Mana, Fan of Blood and the Strip Away. Next we got the Grim Feast with the Clarity. Next we have Summon Infernal Hound with a Meat Shield, Maim, Culling Strike, Fire Exposure and the Fire Mastery. And finally for the last one we are using the Sigil of the Power with the Magnified effect. Most of this setup is structured around using our Skeletal Frost Mages to delete enemies in seconds, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their defense and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at the spell and minion damage node, and go like this while taking the Raw Destruction and the Power of the Dead. Then next we want to move to the right and get all of these three, so Pure Energy, Dampening Shield and the Living Dead, as well as get this whole circle. Then afterwards we keep on going while taking Necrotized Flesh and Relentless Fallen. Then next we go like this, and then from this point take the left path and take all of these nodes. And then from this point and onwards you can go here up to the top and just unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. Also, keep in mind that all of these nodes that we got are very useful, but the ones I mentioned have the top priority, as they are the most important ones to acquire early on in the game, to make our build functional, and then in the late game to make it even more powerful. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Loyal Hellhound for that minion skill and 20% reduced damage. Then second we get Altered Flesh. This will help out in dealing with physical damage if you have chaos resistance, or when you start stacking maximum fire damage, then you will take less cold and lightning damage. Then for our third pick we have the Berat's Will. This will give us more maximum spirit, but in return it will reduce our life by 25%. This might seem like a huge debuff, but it's 100% worth it, because of how insanely high we have our energy shield stacked up. And then finally for the last one we got the Berat's Hand. So feel free to use the exact same path as I have right here. And don't forget to check this video's description to find the link for this website, and this should make it easier for you to follow the tree. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. So when we start we wanna first of all go to the left side and get all of these nodes, and then go down until you get to this keystone called the Deadly Evolution. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this we have even more passives. Which order in which you unlock them doesn't matter, so this time it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Next we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Rattling Scepter. This is one of the most important items as it will increase our minions' damage. However, if you prefer more damage over using a shield for passive block chance, then you can wield a scepter together with a spiked club, or that extra levels to all minion skills. And for bonus stats we want to get more to spirit, max mana, and plus levels of all minion skills. Then also for the offhand we got the advanced Omen Crash Shield with a block. And for stats we want max energy shield, more to spirit, and chaos resistance. Pretty much for this one we want a high energy shield and armor base. And a really good unique to acquire early on is the Ox one. However, you can later on replace it with other options that give you 2 sockets or even more to spirit. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Feather Tiara with the energy shield. And for more we want max energy shield, max life, and plus levels to all minion skills. Then for chest we have the Expert Altar Robe with the energy shield. And for more we got even more energy shield, more to spirit, as well as fire and cold resistance. Then for belt we have the Fine Belt with a faster flask recovery. And for more we want max life, max mana, and more to charm slots. Then for gloves we got the Expert Interested Gloves with the energy shield. And for more we want even more max energy shield, max life, and chaos resistance. Then for boots we're using the Expert Feather Sandals with the energy shield. And for more we need increased movement speed, max energy shield, as well as chaos and lightning resistance. Then for the first ring we got the Prismatic Ring with more to all elemental resistances. And for the extra stats we got max mana, max life, and again even more percentage to all elemental resistances. Well then for the second one we have the Amethyst Ring, as this is a very easy place to get even more chaos resistance. And for more we got max mana, adds physical damage to attacks, and cold and fire resistance. And then finally for the amulet we have the Lunar Amulet with a lot of max energy shield. And for more we want more to spirit, more levels to all minion skills, as well as chaos resistance. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup, which would be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And as you can see from the gameplay, this is one of the easiest and simplest builds in the game. At all times our minions are going to be active, so then all we need to do is run around the map while simply using the pin offering, then hypothermia, and then from here just spam the frost bombs, and that's about it. As I said at the start, this build is very simple, and for weak enemies, you won't really have to do anything besides run into them and then the minions will do the rest. However, what I usually like to do is also keep spamming the Sigil of the Power as soon as it's up, and it will give us a nice simple buff to increase our DPS even more. And then finally, especially in the beginning when you're not geared enough and sometimes may die, then make sure that your elemental resistances are at 75%. Furthermore, make sure that your specific items that you have equipped will give you as much energy shield as possible.